So there was this Middle Eastern merchant called Nasruddin who used to go with a donkey back and forth across the border. And he would go back and forth, back and forth. And each time he would come back looking a little more glamorous, with a few more laden objects on him, looking more and more impressive each time. And the guards knew he must be smuggling something. But each time they inspected him, they found nothing. "Halt," they said. "Show us what you've got on the donkey." And he said, "I'm an honest smuggler. What to say?" And they checked his bags. There was nothing there. He continued. And each time it was like this. They found nothing. But years later, when the man was older, an old man at that moment, the border guard saw him and asked him, "Look, come on, my friend, tell me. We know you were smuggling something. Just be honest. Let me know what it was that you're smuggling." And he looked at them deeply in the eyes and said directly, "Yes, I was smuggling donkeys." So, the same chap, Nasruddin, he was everyone knew Nasruddin. Anyway, he was about to go and see the Lord Mayor of the village there. And he went to see the Lord Mayor, and the Lord Mayor very proudly said, "Look, Nasruddin, I have written a poem. Please tell me what you think." So Nasruddin looked at this poem, and he said, when the Lord Mayor said, "Did you like the poem?" And Nasruddin said, "No, not really. It's not very good." And the mayor was really angry. He was enraged. And he sentenced Nasruddin to 3 days in jail. And the next week, the mayor called Nasruddin into his office and read him another poem. And when the mayor finished reading, he said to Nasruddin, "What do you think of this one?" And then Nasruddin didn't say anything. He just got up and he walked straight out of the room. And the mayor said, "Where do you think you're going?" And Nasruddin said, "To jail." And just because we're on a roll, I'll tell you another story of Nasruddin from the Sufi tradition yet again. So Nasruddin was eating with a scholar, a spiritual scholar, at a local restaurant. And the scholar ordered 2 lamb steaks. And several minutes later, the waiter brought these steaks, one medium-sized one and one much smaller one. Nasruddin immediately took the larger steak and started eating it. And the scholar looked at him and with total disbelief. "What you did violates every moral and ethic that exists, all the etiquettes and all the religious principles we have." And he continued with a very long lecture about what a bad, immoral guy Nasruddin was. And when he finally finished talking, Nasruddin said, "Well, may I ask what you would have done in this situation?" And the scholar, he said, "Well, I would have taken the smaller steak for myself." So Nasruddin put the smaller steak on the scholar's plate and said, "Here you go, bon appetit." So the point of these stories is that often what we see is right under our eyes. But we miss it because we're lost in our thoughts and our minds, and we fail to see the obvious. We're lost in this stories that are continuously going on in our heads, but actually the truth is actually right in front of us and we don't see it. Now, humor has this amazing ability to take us out of our minds and into our hearts. And the Zen tradition and the Sufi tradition knew this very well, but actually all traditions, the Sufi stories are laden with stories of these which are like this, which are kind of spoof, but also very meaningful. Or also the Buddhist tradition, the Jewish tradition, even the Christian tradition has stories like this. And these stories are very similar to like a dervish dance, the whirling dance. They give a serious spiritual lesson, and yet they're full of play as well. And like a good parable, these stories will tease us and actually reveal a deeper spiritual meaning at the same time. And this is a bit like an enlightening slap in the face, which wakes you up from this zombie-like, walking, living sleep that often we live in, into a clear and more lucid way of being. So a lot of these stories, or these jokes, are using a lot of paradox. And the storytellers and teachers, in this way, when they tell these stories, they cause the listeners even to wonder who the real teacher is, even if some of the characters in these stories behave like fools. And another tale from the Sufi tradition, a chap called Mullah, he came upon this frowning man walking along the road to town. He was frowning, he looked frustrated, he looked very unhappy. Mullah said, "What's wrong?" And the man held up a tattered bag and moaned, "All that I own is in this bag, this miserable, wretched sack." And Mullah said, "Too bad." And with that, he snatched the bag and ran down the road. And the man, having lost everything, he burst into tears. And Mullah ran round the bend, placed the sack in the middle of the road where he would come upon it. And when the man saw the bag in the middle of the road, he laughed with joy and said, "Oh, my wonderful bag, I thought I'd lost you." And then Mullah, watching through the bushes, he said, "So this is how to make someone happy." Now, again, we have here represented a fool, inverted commas. And we see that throughout all the spiritual traditions, depicted both in movies and also in books, there is always a fool who, at first glance, seems like the village idiot, but actually in his simplicity shows a great wisdom, a lack of inhibitions, and a great purity there. And these fools, they break all the conventional taboos, and they don't hide their foolishness either. But the fool also has something sacred about him as well. So, from early Christianity in the West, the fool has been recognized as being representing someone who has this license to speak the truth. And I emphasize the word license. The fool was allowed to speak the truth, even in circumstances where nobody else was allowed to say the truth there. Actually, in the Roman Empire, Caesar, he had one slave who was granted again this license to whisper in his ear, "Remember, Caesar, that you are mortal." Again, this was there to remind them somehow of the truth. So they would step down from their situation, their position, whatever they're in, for which they could be limited by a certain amount of ego and power that they have there, and be confronted with the light of the truth happening in that moment. And this license to speak the truth was also used in Roman rituals, for example, and was a moment that also commanded a lot of respect from the participants there and also the witnesses there. So it had a specific function. It was given a specific moment somehow in order to give this opposite somehow situation there to wake people up. So the fool was there for entertainment, but also as being someone serious. And we have, as I said before, this representation in the Roman rituals as both of these. And in many spiritual traditions, we have these court jesters, which we know about from our tradition in England. But also in the Egyptian tradition, they had some dwarves, for example, who would also be performing in the courts there. And the fool or the court jester's role was to speak the truth under the guise of humor. And we see this, for example, Shakespeare uses a lot these characters. Also in the Chinese courts in ancient China, there was the earliest evidence chronicled from this time was the time of the Zhou dynasty, which is 1045 to 256 BC. The time of the Yellow Emperor, where there was chronicled 4 highly intelligent men who acted as ironic critics to their emperor, despite the rather dangerous courts. I mean, you normally wouldn't want to be an ironic critic to the emperor, but they were allowed to be like that somehow, given a value for their service doing this. There was also the gentleman called Birbal, who was a witty companion and advisor to the Mughal emperor Akbar in 1528 to 1586. In King Arthur's court, there was Dagonet, sorry, I don't know how to say him, who was the fool. There was not a lot known about Dagonet. And then we had Jean, who was jester to Charles the Simple of France, who was the earliest non-imperial European court fool. And in this, there are stories that actually the King Charles, he proposed that they should swap places, since Jean thought himself to be so clever. And Jean declined, saying that as king, he would be embarrassed to be served by such a fool. And he actually got away with this. And this was somehow this license that the fools had to speak the truth. They were the only ones that really could speak the truth. The only ones who could, the jesters were the only ones who could really make fun of the king and the kingdom. So this license to fool was, as I mentioned before, also in many rituals. And in the Native American tradition, in the Zuni Native Americans, they had their Koyemchi fools, who were part of the Kachina dance groups. And these were actually more sacred clowns rather than fools. And they had this license to mock at anything and indulge in kind of any obscenity, because they had supernatural powers. And amongst this, they could perfectly control all their energies, including their sexual energies. And they could bring a terrible retribution to those who crossed them. And here the clowns these sacred clowns were seen as powerful shamans or priests, and not just a funny person. And this license to mock was this potent mix, somehow being enjoyable to watch, but also inducing the state of awe in people. And therefore there is this close relationship between comedy and sacredness, and also sacred ritual. And one of the reasons why Nietzsche said, laughing at something is the first sign of a higher psychic life. So fools were, their acts were there to break through this facade of normal everyday life and to allow other realities to shine through and to show the truth through folly, through wisdom. And now this, I think, is somehow we've seen. There's a lot shown in a lot of creative works, movies, films, books, etc. They portray this fool somehow as being very obviously quite foolish, but also behind in all the traditions, there somehow a wisdom there also in this. Actually, in the Shinto tradition in Japan, they have even laughter festivals, or warai festivals. Sorry, I don't know how you say this actually, where they ritualistically laugh and they joke. And actually, there was a very special significance in Japan to laughter, because of the creation of their country was based on a kind of god, a fool god, being part of God's creation. And laughter was in response to a kind of divine striptease that took place to persuade the sun goddess to restore light and life to the world. And we had Amaterasu Omikami, who was ancestress of the imperial family, who was a goddess. She hid herself in a cave on Mount Takama, and Takama no Para, bringing on an eclipse and many disasters. And she hid herself in this cave. And, this was a disaster for Japan, because I think they need light at that stage. Anyway, it was very important that life and light was in the world. And then one goddess had to intervene to kind of bring her out of that cave. And Ami no Uzumi no Mikoto bound up her sleeves with the cord of heavenly Pikaji vine, tied around her head a headband of the heavenly Masaki vine, and bound together bundles of sasa leaves to hold in her hands. and overturned a bucket before the heavenly rock cave door and stamped resoundingly on it. Then she apparently became divinely possessed, exposed her breasts, and pushed her skirt band down to her genitals. And then Takama no Para shook as the 800 myriad deities laughed at once. And the gods then laugh repeatedly in the story as they persuade gradually the goddess to emerge, the sun goddess to emerge again into the world. And this is one of the stories of the creation of Japan and how she came about. Japan came about through this almost this godly, this foolish but very playful dance that this other goddess did in order to bring her out, and this laughter of all the other deities there to persuade the sun goddess to emerge from her cave. And in also within the European tradition, we have also this case in the medieval times of the motley fool, who had the license for laughter and mockery. And this was depicted in for example, As You Like It, the Shakespeare works, where the courtier, Jacques, reports finding a motley fool lying in the forest and wishes that he himself were costumed in motley so he could openly improve the world and its wicked ways. And here motley refers to the kind of garments that we know so well that the jester has, with the cap with the floppy ears adorned with bells and accompanied by a staff, this rather jovial-looking, merry attire that fools we often see them in theatre dressed like this. So this is a little bit about this character, the fool, who actually is seen as a fool. If we look from one perspective, acts like one, but actually has this other side which is full of this wisdom and has this ability to shine the light of the truth on the situation. That was his role. Actually, we have in the tarot the Fool card as well. And here, although also we can think of it as the Fool, but also represents this new awakenings, the new start, the new approach to life that exists, also because of the wisdom that exists there. The one who says that they don't know is actually the one who probably knows more than anybody else, actually, because they're willing to accept the fact that there is many things beyond what we know, and is not confined by a illusory belief that we know everything. And it is said that it is one of the biggest taboos. Alan Watts actually said, the philosopher, that one of the biggest taboos is the fact that we know ourselves. And it is one of the things that humour cracks very well, its ability to actually make us realise that actually many things we don't know about ourselves. It shines a light in those dark corners that exist. Now, some other beings who are not afraid to be humorous and to be just who they are throughout history were the divine madmen and madwomen also. And these holy fools, shall we say. And there are many examples of these throughout history in many traditions, in Christian tradition, some of the fathers of the desert, for example, even some of the saints. Also in the Sufi tradition, in many traditions, even the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, I'll explain one in a minute, have these divine mad beings there who were very much not afraid to show their ways somehow. They always had very important divine messages, but they were completely acting beyond any confines of how normal society would think they would act. And they would exhibit a great deal of purity, although it would take one with a pure heart to also see their purity, to understand the kind of purity they had. They were extremely unwell behaved, And they were often acting in a humorous way, extremely shameless. They didn't really care what people thought. And because they didn't really care what people thought, they were able to bring certain godly messages very easily to those around them. And in the Byzantine church, we had holy fools such as Simeon of Emesa in the early 6th century, and also Andrew the Fool in the late 15th century, who actually canonized later for their miracles. Despite their seemingly rather lunatic behavior, they were very scandalous, shall we say, in their behavior during their lifetime. Simeon left the fathers of the desert, where he was a hermit, and in order to perform acts where he would mock people and dance with the slave girls and throw nuts and misbehave in church and do all these things that were seemingly not very spiritual at the time. But actually, whilst he was doing all those things, he was making miracles happen. He was healing people. He was doing all sorts of stuff. And there was also the Zen Buddhist monk, Ryokan, from around the time of 1758. That was when he was born anyway, till the mid-1831 type time. And he had the name Taiju, which was the great fool. And he enlightened all his students with his jokes and his challenges that he had. And then we have also one of the great divine madmen, Drugpa Kunli. Have any of you heard of Drugpa Kunli? So those who have traveled in India would know Drugpa Kunli because there are many books about him. He was known as, there was even a book called Drugpa Kunli, the Divine Madman. And he was one of the most celebrated characters in Bhutan. He came from the Tibetan tradition of crazy wisdom. And he was born from a very noble clan of the Ralung monastery in western Tibet. But he believed that strict conventions kept people away from learning the true teachings of Buddha. And he wandered through Bhutan singing and with humor and making songs and really with outrageous behavior. He was quite a shocking character. And he was famous for not very normal methods to bring people into enlightenment. So, for example, he had this thunderbolt of flaming wisdom, which you might be able to guess what his thunderbolt of flaming wisdom was. It was he had his massive lingam, that's a tantric name for penis, and he would wake people up with his massive lingam. He would whack those who were too serious with his big lingam and wake them up into realization. Or he would make love he would make love and enlighten thousands of women through making love with his thunderbolt of flaming wisdom. And he even tamed, a demoness who was taunting the world and terrorizing everybody. But he enlightened her with his mighty thunderbolt lingam and placed her in a stupa, which is a temple, like a monument temple. And this temple still exists in Bhutan, and people go there to become more fertile, for example. To bestow their fertility. Actually, if you go to Bhutan, you can find his lingam, paintings of lingams, very graphically, on all the buildings. They're not shy in Bhutan. On all the buildings are pictures of lingams, celebrating him and this immense power conveyed by his lingam. There's also a story of him where he was sitting with some very pious, very serious monks, and they were very serious. And so he killed a deer, and then he started to eat it like a crazed man, eating it ravenously, and the monks were really shocked. And then they were really shocked. They didn't know. They started to shout at him, whatever, and then he brought the deer back to life. And for them, it was an awakening moment to help them to realize just how serious they were. Another story of his was that they were doing some kind of rite of confession, these monks, very serious monks, and the Lama offered a handful of tea, the size of a yak's eye, very small, to them. And the monks, and he said, free tea all around. And the monks, he said, there's not enough tea for 300 monks, please go away. And the Drugpa Kunli, he started to run around the mountain where they were, jumping over girdles, skirting over small stones, just going round and round and round and round and round and round. And they were going, look at that madman, see how he runs. And he said, this is like your spiritual practice. And for them it was an enlightening moment because they realized that their sterile spiritual practices were just making them go round and round in circles. And they were not reaching the supreme realization and the truth. So these divine madmen, through their genius and also their total shamelessness and humor and purity that they exhibited, the fact that they were not afraid to just be themselves and just to show the truth and the reality, they were actually bringing very spiritual messages and helping to wake people up in a society sometimes which could be very dry and very serious in the way that they live their spiritual life. And we'll see in a bit that actually a seriousness is somehow can be and living a life very serious can be actually the biggest hiding place for the ego. And somehow if you're able to if you can be as actually conscious as these divine mad beings were, despite the fact that they act in such a raucous way, but because they're endowed with such an awareness, they were also able to polarize everybody else's experience and help awaken people to a more superior reality that existed. And just so we polarize it with a spiritual woman here, we have the great Saint Teresa of Avila, who was also she was completely in love with God, and was often in a state of divine ecstasy and rapture for God. And one quote that she said is, "How did those priests ever get so serious and preach all that gloom? I don't think God tickled them yet. Please, beloved, hurry." Actually, it was a poem by her. So how did those priests ever get so serious and preach all that gloom? I don't think God tickled them yet. Beloved, please hurry. So, another Sufi tale. So there was once a small boy who banged a drum all day, and no matter what anyone else said, he wouldn't stop. And various people were calling the neighbors and asked them to do something about this child. One by one, the townsfolk came to warn the boy about, come on, your eardrums, they'll be damaged. Or, look, drums are only for sacred ceremonies. You don't, not now, not all the time. They even gave him a book. They gave him meditation lessons. They tried to find him other things to do. They even gave the neighbors earplugs to give to him. But nothing worked. Eventually, a Sufi came along and handing the boy a hammer, he said, "I wonder what's inside the drum." So, another Sufi scholar called Indus Shah also tells a humorous story about two fishermen in a boat. And the men caught some fine fish. And when they were going home, one said to the other, "How are we going to make our way back to that rather excellent fishing place that we were at?" And the second said, "I thought of that. I placed a mark on the boat with chalk." And the other one said, "Oh, you fool. That's no good. Suppose next time we're given another boat." Okay. So these Sufi stories can be enlightening also in their simplicity. They're quite an ironic humor somehow, but they reveal the truth which escapes the mental filter. And this mental filter that we have, our minds, often limit and block our understandings. And sometimes this is the point, that actually the answer is right in front of us. We don't see it because we're so lost in our heads and in our minds. And then we miss actually the lesson that exists there. So there was once a woman who heard of the fruits of heaven, And she wished so much to find this fruit of heaven, which would give her the immediate knowledge. And so she found a dervish, a famous dervish from the Sufi tradition, one that they called Sabar. She said to him, "How can I find this fruit so that I may attain this immediate eternal knowledge?" And he said, Sabar said, "You would be advised to study with me. But if you do not do so, you will have to travel resolutely and restlessly throughout the whole world." So she left him. She didn't take his advice. She left him. She sought another one, Arif, the wise one. She found Hakim, the sage, then Majdup, the mad, and then she found Alim, the scientist. She found many, many more. And then passed 30 years in her search. And finally she came to a garden. And there stood the tree of heaven. And from its branches, this fruit of heaven that she wanted so much. And standing beside the tree was the first dervish, Sabar. And she said to him, "Why did you not tell me when we first met that you were the guardian of the fruit of the tree of heaven?" she asked him. And he said, "Because you would not have believed me. And besides, this tree only produces fruit once in 30 years. Once in 30 years. It took her 30 years to find the cave. So it only produces fruit in 30 years. So again, another meaningful story, also with a humor there, helping us to realize somehow that the reality of situation, that actually somehow wisdom knows best. And in the right moment, actually, if we are open to the great wisdom, then the truth will reveal itself also. So one day, the sun in the cave struck up a conversation. And the sun had trouble understanding what dark and what dank meant. And the cave didn't get the hang of what light and clear was. So they decided to swap places. The cave went up to the sun and said, "I see. This is beyond wonderful. Now come down and see where I've been living." And the sun went down to the cave and said, "I don't see any difference." You get it? Good. So humor has an important function in today's world. It lightens up our lives and takes us out of our heads and into our hearts. And this doesn't include on the spiritual path, where we can... this doesn't exclude being on the spiritual path, where we often take things far too seriously. And it doesn't mean taking a superficial approach to spirituality, but understanding that it's very easy for us to engage with our egos on the spiritual path. We become very attached to our actions. Even in the name of spirituality, we do our yoga, we do it because we have our spiritual practice, and we do it and we label ourselves as yogis, and we do all these things, and we're great meditators and all of those things. And then we also become very attached to what we do, and we also develop spiritual egos, and we think we're awakening and we're oh so woke and all of that stuff. Actually, in the process also we can develop something called a spiritual ego, which can be a big trap for those on the spiritual journey. So we take very seriously our practice, our journey, our challenges, our spiritual awakening, our tests, our evolution. But sometimes in this process we don't see things very objectively. And this hinders our capacity to resolve the situation and even to pass the spiritual tests that we take. Because we take our whole lives very, very seriously in this process. So humor gives us a chance to step beyond our mental constructs and see life from a whole new perspective. And this new perspective can be genius, even if it's very simple. And we just didn't see it before, because sometimes we get so lost in our minds and so caught up in our problems. So as we are evolving on the spiritual journey, often it comes to light part of ourselves that we don't want to see. And, you could be years practicing yoga and spirituality, for example, tantra, whatever, and because you hadn't really had to face certain challenges earlier on in your spiritual life, later on, you might suddenly notice, for example, when you enter into a relationship or something like that, you are jealous and you have some aggressive tendencies or whatever there. But we don't want people to notice it because everyone's so spiritual around us. We don't want these things to be seen, and so we hide them a little bit in the shadows there in our closet. But this is where a sense of humor is really valuable, because if we can't laugh at ourselves sometimes, actually we'll continue to hide all those parts away in the closet, and they will just continue to grow and grow and grow there. And then they will explode in a moment where you really don't want them to explode and to be seen. And if we're able to deal with things in a humorous way, if we're able to laugh at ourselves, to see situations in a funny way, if we're able to bring to laugh at moments that even could be really challenging for us, and to find humor in those moments, this laughter will bring light and warmth, which are, as we know, two essential conditions for growth. Look at plants. If we're growing something, we need light and warmth, and then things grow. In the same way, light and warmth in us will help us to grow and to pass those tests that we had. Actually, I had a friend, because he passed away, and he had cancer. And he was always an extremely funny guy, very funny. He was renowned for his humor and funniness. And till his final moments, he was requesting humorous things, sending humorous things, being funny, as much as his energy would allow him to be. Because he knew that actually this was the thing that could awaken him to understand more about his situation that he was in, and also to help others to deal with the situation that he was in. And we all know him very well, and his memory, he was always connected with this humor. And for me, it's a very good example of somebody who used humor in this way to help to awaken and to bring this warmth to people's hearts in a conscious way. Now, I'd like that we do a little exercise now. Now, it's not so complex, this, and maybe it's a bit goofy as well, and a little bit, it might be a bit weird for some of you to do, but just to try it, okay? Just to turn to the person next to you or the nearest person to you, and to find something, to think a little bit now, something that is an issue for you. Can be something about yourself, or something in your life that's not a positive issue, not so great issue. And I want you to describe it to the person in a humorous way. Now, the easiest way to do that is to say it in a funny voice. Like, I don't know. Okay, is this true? I fell off a bunk bed 5 years ago, and now I've got a bone sticking out of my foot. Okay? But to try it and to see if, something that's current for you, and see if it changes your attitude or your perspective towards the situation. Now, that you don't have to say it in a funny voice, but it's the easiest way to find a humorous way to talk about something. It's a bit harder if you try to make stand-up regarding a difficult situation, unless you're a stand-up comedian. So, if you've read Zen, for example, you would have encountered humor also. If you've ever read the writings of Suzuki Roshi, we'll see that there is a lot of humor. He's a Zen monk. There was a lot of humor in the things that he said. He popularized Zen Buddhism in the US. He was once asked by a student, how much ego do you need? Kind of a bit of an odd question, but he was asked, how much ego do you need? And he replied, just enough so that you don't step in front of a bus. Actually, it's a humorous answer, but actually it's quite right. You need as much as you can stay in this physical reality and deal with life, but maybe we don't need much more of that somehow. We can transcend much more of that. And then a clinical psychiatrist questioned Suzuki Roshi about consciousness. And he said, I don't know anything about consciousness. I just try to teach my students how to hear the birds sing. So as humans, we love laughing. Do any of you not like laughing? we like laughing. There's probably not one culture on earth that does not experience laughter. You don't like laughing. You like laughing. It's universal. It's a universal thing to laugh. Kids, they laugh. They laugh from a baby. They know how to laugh. It's kind of innate in us somehow. And it's a way to express pleasure. You don't laugh because you're desperately unhappy. I mean, something in you. I mean, there's some kind of funny types of laugh where people are... But that's not the kind of laughter we're speaking about here. We're speaking about proper laughing. And it is a way also to face the suffering and to also understand us as humans, how we are, to understand our condition, our ways of being, our emotions, our limitations there. Humor is very real. It's a very real quality that we have. To laugh is very real, as much as it is to cry. And we often think, that crying is an emotion that we should allow to happen. Yeah? We should also allow ourselves to laugh, because it is a way that we can really release a lot of tension and to express stuff that maybe we don't get a chance to really express enough of in our lives. We can see how important comedy is if we look on the TV or Netflix or whatever, how many comedy shows there are, how many stand-up comedians there are. There is a lot of comedy on, and there's a good reason for it, because comedy is extremely healing and is also a way to help us to see life in a different perspective, in different ways. So comedy gives us a great chance to laugh at ourselves and to not get caught in drama, and to instead to dance in life and not be caught with that life can sometimes bring us, and things can suddenly become much more than they really need to be inside of us. And as I mentioned before, seriousness itself can be the great hiding place, a great refuge of the ego. And this will just impede our spiritual progress. If we are, sadly, I do know that there are many spiritual paths, for example, where people do live that life very seriously. I stayed in one ashram before, and in India, and there were many Western disciples. Actually, the Indian disciples were not like this, but the Western disciples were looking like life had left them, literally. And for me, that wasn't. It was an interesting situation to be in. They were looking very sad. They were crying a lot, and they looked like their life had left them, literally. And it doesn't have to be like that. Spirituality is a place of joy, is a place of life itself. It's because spirituality is the ability to bring sacredness into life. Therefore, it should not be devoid of life and should be an expression of the great laughter that exists inside of us. And being able to express this can allow us to actually even progress on the spiritual path. And it is a way that we can actually even harmonize our structure, being able to laugh and to awaken our being. I'll speak a little more about this a bit later. So also, humor brings connection, yeah? And this is something that often we don't realize, but we do realize what we don't realize. When we see stand-up and we start to laugh at stand-up, and they say, and this happened like this, and we like this, and my husband said this, and we laugh. We don't laugh sometimes, but we laugh because we recognize that situation. We're like, oh yeah, actually that kind of happens in my life also. And we often see ourselves mirrored in the situations that come up, and we can relate to those subjects. And in this moment, actually behind this, we feel, when we relate to it, we feel that we're part of a shared humanity. We're part of a greater connection that exists with others at the same time. We know that we're part of something much more than just us little beings alone on the planet. So comedy helps us to see, to feel part of something, and then through feeling part of something, also to, in the warmth that brings, be able to contemplate even painful truths that we would have a difficult time to look at directly. What warms our souls, what makes us feel that comfort there, that warmth there, will also allow us to let stuff out that normally we wouldn't see, and to process those things, and breaking a lot of taboos in in this process as well. I mentioned already that Alan Watts spoke of the taboo of knowing who you are. We think we know everything already. We think that we've got it all sorted. We know every aspect of ourselves. And then comedy can break through this because suddenly we're laughing at ourselves, realizing, did I do that? There's something that escaped my radar, my attention radar there. There's something that I didn't realize about myself. I acted like that. You can either die of embarrassment and never leave your flat ever again, or you can laugh at the situation completely. I can tell you one very embarrassing situation for me, which for most of you will probably be really embarrassing, but for me it's one of, that makes me laugh still anyway, it doesn't make anyone else laugh. So I was running from work, and I was running from work onto the tube to get to another place. This was years ago. And I was also multitasking, so I was jumping on the tube and I was putting my headphone in my ear, putting a little bit of roll-on perfume on at the same time, and looking through my bag of something. And then I realized that I had an orange G-string hanging from my headphones on the tube. And I was like, how do I deal with this in a normal way? But for me, it's such a ridiculous situation, but yeah, it made me extremely aware, for example, that I can be extremely unattentive, and also that that my bag needs to be a lot more organized, and that I should stop running from place to place and just relax. So there are many. I think could write books of the number of rather embarrassing situations I've been in. But in a way, these situations have given me ability to laugh at myself in many situations and to see how even in ridiculousness there can be important spiritual lessons there also. If you can see them, laughter helps you to see them better because you can they stop hiding. They're just right in front of your face. So we can see these dark shadows, we can see them clearly. And they can also be very thought-provoking, these experiences otherwise. And they can be as revealing as Zen koans can be. Contemplating the sound of one hand clapping, for example, is Zen koan. Let's contemplate the sound of one hand clapping. But also this humor can also make you think out of the box. And that thinking out of the box is what's essential for us to break through some patterns, rigid limits that we have. We behave often very robotically, just doing what's according to some subconscious patterns and behaviors and mechanisms that we have. And humor can sometimes awaken us to a reality where we can think out of the box and start to do things a little bit differently in our lives. And awaken a kind of shamelessness about ourselves, where we stop to be as inhibited as we have a tendency to be, especially in England, where we're often too scared to act in a certain way, or we don't want to upset people, or like that. It doesn't mean to be unconscious, by the way. Shamelessness is also requiring us to be conscious as its middle name, but also not to be ashamed to stand up for what we believe in, what is true, and to be ourselves, but in the most conscious way. And this can grow a great wisdom from being able to be like that. And coming also from this awakening of the wisdom, humor helps us to perceive the paradoxes of life. Life is not just one straight road, and it has many contradictions. There exist opposites. You can act in one way and be another way at the same time. You know, we're given all sorts of situations where they're seemingly very contradictory. There's an unpredictability in life, unpredictability in life, and we can either be freaked out by it and think, well, this is like nothing's going according to my book and my page here, or we can see that there is a very profound, if we can develop a very profound confidence that there is something we can hold on to even beyond this unpredictability, this uncertainty of life, which actually it's only regarding the material world that uncertainty exists, because there is a certainty in some things. And comedy is divine in a way. It is godly. It's an attribute of God. It's a quality of God, because actually we can discover in this process, how we can liberate ourselves from our limits and our limitations, our inferior tendencies, our attachments, for example, and discover the freedom of the spirit through humor itself, through comedy. It's an interesting one. Once you learn to just get up and, for example, tell a joke, even if it's seemingly the most serious audience, not talking about you guys, but seemingly the most serious audience, still maybe not get any laughs, not talking about you guys, but still stand there and do this, yeah? And still do that. Then you come out of it and think, okay, but you know what? I did it. I stood up and I told a truth in one way. And I stood up and I said these things, yeah? And so it has a way to liberate us and to make us able to see the humor in life itself, and to see that actually life is an amazing game and a dance, and that we are part of this, really. We just need to play it, but play it consciously. Otherwise, we'll be overwhelmed by it and not see that it's a game. We'll see it as a drama unfolding. Life is a drama. No, it's a beautiful play that we are part of. So, a little bit more about laughter. So laughter is coming actually from the third chakra, Manipura chakra. It's associated with the energies of fire. And these chakras are energetic gateways, as we know, which help us to access universal energies that exist. They're kind of energetic portals that exist. So laughter is an expansion of energies at the level of Manipura chakra. And they are expressive, emotional acts using all the facial movements, breathing sounds, rhythms. When we laugh, we don't just laugh like this. We laugh with our whole face, we laugh with our bellies, we laugh with even our arms. I'm talking about this kind of laugh, not just okay? And afterwards, you feel very good. It's very purifying, it's very healing. Yeah, it's okay. You feel like if you have a really good laugh, a really good one, then you often feel like something's released. You feel like this energy purifying inside of you. And this is because when we have this kind of belty, good laugh, we move energies from Manipura chakra up to the heart. The energies rise up to the heart, and then it becomes an emanation of the heart, laughter itself. So it is expressing then a kind of a love for life, laughter itself. It's a form of communication, and it is a way of expressing joy. It is releasing and balancing. As I said, it can release a lot of tensions from our structure, laughter. And often, if we laugh open and relaxed, so our laugh will be different. If we're tense, laughter will be a bit tense as well. We won't move very much. It will be like this a bit. But if we're open and relaxed, we will laugh in a more hearty manner, and it will express our personality in its best form. And we see that our personality is harmonious and open like that, compared to the very more small and discreet laugh, which is very showing a small and lacking power part of ourselves when we laugh like that. So it also reflects how our personality is. If we're a very open, jovial person, our laughter will be very open and jovial. If we're kind of sneaky, maybe our laughter will be a bit sneaky. If we are somebody that's more inhibited, our laughter will be less. We won't move very much of ourselves. It has a very cathartic function, as I mentioned, very purifying. It removes tensions from our structure. There is a reason why there were festivals in the Shinto tradition for laughing itself. It removes a lot of tensions at the level of Manipura chakra. And Manipura chakra is connected with the ego. So it will help to shake these tensions out of that area, and can purify energies there, eliminating tensions there. So if we know we have problems at the level of Manipura chakra, say we have certain tensions, even a lack of confidence self-confidence comes from Manipura chakra, being unbalanced, not energized enough. By laughing, a lot by engaging ourselves in laughter, we can actually awaken Manipura chakra and harmonize Manipura chakra. It becomes an efficient tool for transforming and awakening energies at that level. And harmonizing energies there. So even it's literally a path of awakening and healing laughter. And that's also one of the reasons why we have laughter yoga. From time to time we have laughter yoga sessions here. Or there's other laughter yoga elsewhere also. There's even laughter clinics where you can go and laugh your way out of illnesses, or have laughter therapy to laugh your way out of and to heal yourself from different issues. And one of the reasons why is because of this huge flow of endorphins that takes place when we laugh, which is able to endorphins are happy hormones, but also very healing in their energies. It is also known that at the level of Manipura chakra, this third chakra, is where there is accumulated effects of malefic influences if it's not balanced there. They hit you at the level of Manipura chakra. It's about power trips, it's about anger, things like that can hit you at that level. And sometimes we call these demons. And in the Tibetan tradition, one of the best protections they said against the demonic influences was a very strong Manipura, this chakra, and to laugh at the demonic influences with all of your heart. Now, they would literally have techniques and meditations where they would laugh at these demons that exist, and really this would help to purify the being and release those beings and sort of diminish and stop the effects of those energies at that level. And now it says laugh from all of your hearts, and that means this is referring to the fact that if we use all the abdominal belt and sublimate all the energies to Anahata chakra, this will have this very cathartic effect, laughing away even the bad energies from our system. Also, some of you may have noticed that when you laugh, but you become conscious when you're aware when you're laughing, and then afterwards, if you take a moment to be aware of the laugh afterwards, you feel very centered in your heart. And this is also because of this purifying effect and the sublimation of energies, this rising of energies to the heart chakra, to the heart level. So, in the Christian tradition, from Proverbs 17:22 from the Bible, a merry heart does good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth bones. And here referring to merry heart being a good remedy, being something that we need to be harmonious, happy. There was a Greek poet, Pindar, who said that the best of healers is a good cheer. And Aristotle said that that laughter was a bodily exercise precious to health. So it is a very good medicine. There are many examples of people who've healed themselves just by following a regime of laughter. It releases a lot of endorphins. It gives you a good abdominal workout. It's maybe not as big as going to the gym, but it does give you a good workout of many organs inside. It's very relaxing. It's a natural de-stressor and has a very exorcising effect, as mentioned, as the Tibetans knew very well. It relaxes the whole body, and we can see that actually if we have we see a lot of physical tension and stress dissipated from the body following a good laughter session. It also boosts the immune system, and it decreases stress hormones and increases the immune cells and infection-fighting antibodies. So it improves our resistance to disease. Probably one of the reasons why people who are more depressed, they have a tendency to have a lower immunity and to get more unwell. But laughter brings it's even, what's his name? Name escapes. There's a scientist who actually showed that, actually some of his work is showing that every cell, when you're happy, literally every cell is happy in your body, and how important, he speaks about cellular memory, and how important it is to have a good state of consciousness in order to have a good physical state of health, because literally our cells remember, and Bruce Lipton, our cells remember and will hold that memory even for years afterwards. And so laughter, being a laughing person. It's like all our cells in our body are laughing also. It also protects the heart, also because we use so many muscles when we're laughing, and this improves the tonicity of the muscles and the vessels around the heart, increasing blood flow, can even prevent heart attacks, cardiovascular problems. And I mean, we should think about why, for example, there are so many more cases of heart issues these days. And okay, it can be our diet, which can be very poor. It can also be because of this. People have closed their heart more than, I guess, in the olden times, where being jovial was somehow more way to be and somehow aspired for. But people have somehow. There is this in some societies a tendency to be cool, but to be literally cool, to leave the emotions out, to put some walls around. We've been hurt, and I don't want to be in love again, ever again, or things like this. We tend to build walls around ourselves. We close our heart. But if we can actually laugh at those situations instead, we stop to have those walls that stop us from living from our hearts, and we start to awaken ourselves to another reality where love lives in our life and inside of us as well. It burns calories. I mean, it uses a lot of muscles, definitely, and we use a lot of energy in the process. It takes away anger and helps us to see other perspectives. Bitterness also, resentments. Helps us to live longer. There was a study in Norway that found that people with a strong sense of humor outlived those that didn't laugh very much. And this was noticeable, for example, in those who were battling cancer. So, regarding mental health, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that laughter would improve mental health, but it stops distressing emotions. You can't feel anxious, angry, or sad and laugh at the same time. I mean, really laugh at the same time. When you laugh, you're at least allowing the joy inside of you to be expressed. If you're feeling down, I'm a psychiatrist, so I actually do say this to my patients, some of them, who are open to this. I tell them to watch comedy, because it is a way to laugh, to lift the spirit, to release tensions there, to awaken ourselves to happiness in our lives. And it is a very direct way to bring ourselves, to lift ourselves. It helps us to relax and recharge, laughter. As I mentioned, it reduces stress hormones and increases our energies. And this increasing our energies and reducing the stress will help us to be able to be more focused more and accomplish much more. We accomplish much less when we're stressed. We're very inefficient when we're stressed. When we're relaxed, we're much more efficient and better at what we do. Just that normally relaxation is associated with slacking off and kind of like. When I say relaxed, I mean we do our actions relaxed, but we're still focused and we're still doing our actions. Okay? Laughter shifts perspective, which is important. If you're very depressed, you're often locked in a certain mindset and you think that life is utterly hopeless and you don't see the extra doors that exist, just the four walls. And what laughter does is that it gives psychological distance and emotional distance to things, so that actually when we take a step back, we do see the fact that there are other perspectives there are other doorways there to take us out of our situation. And with this will help us to stop feeling overwhelmed and can diffuse conflicts by giving this emotional distance also. Even situations where we're fighting, we're arguing with somebody, laughter can suddenly give us that space that we can see that maybe we don't need to have this fight at the moment. Maybe there is another way to resolve this situation, that love does exist there. And laughter draws us closer to others. I don't know if any of you have been on this, there is this video, but with the laughing Buddha. I don't know if you've seen that before, with the guy on the tube, and if I had it now I would show you, but I don't. The guy in Russia, and he starts to laugh on the tube, and then everybody starts to laugh also and join in that laughter. But actually, in real life, in our lives, Have any of you been, I certainly have been, I've been in a situation where I've been on the tube, everyone's quite serious in their own world, on their phones, usually on the tube, and then somebody starts to laugh. And then they're just laughing to themselves. But actually just seeing that person laugh, and this has happened to me, it makes me feel like warm to them, and I feel connected to them. And then it makes me also smile and generates this. And then you see that many other people start at least to smile and to feel more open. So it is drawing us closer to others and bringing us more connected to other people. Laughter helps us to be more spontaneous also, which is important. It gets us out of our heads and away from our troubles. We need this. We need to be more spontaneous in our lives. Otherwise, we're just like robots in our lives. And the perspective of seeing that life is not as bad as we think it is in that moment can be very useful when things get really hard. It helps us to let go of any defensiveness. We're given some feedback. We don't know what to do. We would start to resent the feedback, criticism. But if we can laugh at the situation, laugh at ourselves, maybe how we act, then maybe we can see whether that feedback is true or not, at least. And that will help us to save us a lot of resentment or anger that we might hold inside of us, or hurt we might hold inside of us from a defensive attitude that we might take in that moment. And as I mentioned before, it also releases a lot of inhibitions. And we live in a society where we're a little bit ashamed to say how we feel and to be ourselves sometimes, and to be the amazing examples of whatever that we can be. And we have some shame in our lives, and laughter can be a way that we can release that and to unblock those energies and to let ourselves be really our true manifestation of who we can be. And it allows us to express our true feelings. We can, it can be a situation where you just don't know how to say how you're feeling, and then you laugh, something makes you laugh, and then you're freed up to really express whatever you need or want to say in that moment. I'm sure that all of us have experienced a lot of what I've just said, but maybe I've just put it on paper a bit more so you can understand this more clearly or see it more point blank. So in order to be a real laughter being, to be in laughter in life, we have to allow ourselves a little bit to have some silliness there. And I want to underline, it's not about being unconscious. Yeah, it's not about running down the street and, chucking toilet paper all over the floor and, throwing rubbish everywhere or something like that. But actually to allow yourself to play with life, but very consciously and in an aware way, to be a playful jester of life itself, without losing the awareness at the same time. Let the mind and the ego go on holiday, but just allow yourself to play with existence. And even if it's difficult to let go, allow laughter to let you go. And that means sometimes, maybe you can do this on your own. I mean, it works, but even looking in the mirror and smiling, if you feel down or something like this works. It's also something I tell my patients. Looking in a mirror and smiling, faking it, or laughing. It's true, fake it until you make it. Because when you laugh and you smile, you trigger a response that actually you look at yourself and you actually think, this is hilarious what I'm doing at the moment. And actually you naturally start then to laugh and to smile. And it triggers this. Even actually, this is part of one of the techniques of laughter yoga, to make yourself laugh until you laugh anyway. And then you laugh in a very natural way. So it doesn't have to be something that's alien to us. And it can be something that is our best friend in a way, this laughter that exists. So let laughter take us over. And to not try to control it when it happens, just allow yourself to laugh. And it will make others happy too. And to allow yourself to laugh wholeheartedly, because it can remove, as I said before, many inhibitions. Just allow yourself to be in that laughter and to allow what's caught up inside just to express itself. And Alan Watts said that the whole art of life he's a philosopher for those who don't know. The whole art of life is in knowing how to transform anxiety into laughter. And that's an interesting art to have, to make the stress a joy. So we need laughter. It's healing. It's something that shouldn't be, it's unifying. It shouldn't be something that's separating us from spirituality. It should be part of our spiritual lives, part of our awakening, part of our spiritual growth, our evolution. And it's something that our soul longs for and wants to do. And spiritual journey should not be one that's devoid of laughter and devoid of joy and happiness. It should be very much part of our lives. Instead of taking ourselves far too seriously, which can sometimes just reinforce our inhibitions and our fears. Instead, we want to expose them and to let that freedom of our heart shine forth. And if we can laugh at ourselves, we can laugh at just about anything. And this will bring a big freedom into our lives.